Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that affects almost all of us, the digital economy, and what we're calling the marriage net. We're going to explore how massive macroeconomic and technological shifts are quite literally rewiring our modern relationships, our intimacy, and even the fundamental financial logic behind marriage itself.
Let me ask you a question, and this might hit a little close to home for some of you. Is the digital economy quietly breaking the traditional marriage? I ask because if you've been feeling this deep, almost unexplainable exhaustion in your relationship lately, I want you to know you're absolutely not alone. We really have to step back and ask ourselves if this structural shift to digital work, this amazing convenience we all celebrate, is actually a hidden force that's seriously straining our home lives.
You know, the answer might actually lie in a loss of built-in physical distance. There's this incredibly insightful idea from Fast Company that highlights something we almost never talk about. Think back to when you and your partner worked in entirely different places. You didn't know every little detail of each other's day, right? So catching up over dinner was a genuine form of connection. Now, well, if you both work from home, you already know their big presentation went sideways because you literally heard it through the drywall. You're watching their stress unfold in real time. Losing that built-in distance quietly erodes the mystery and the curiosity that actually sustains long-term desire.
Okay, let's dive into the micro level and look specifically at the friction of the home office.
To really diagnose this friction, we need to look at a concept from a major study out of the University of New South Wales. They call it ICT permeability. Now that's just the academic term for how your emails, your Slack pings, your Zoom calls, how all of that technology literally pierces the once solid barrier between your work life and your home life. It gives us a really concrete scientific name for that overwhelming feeling of always-on intrusion. The wall that used to exist between your living room and the boardroom, yeah, it's completely gone.
And that permeability leads straight to this, after-work frustration. The researchers define this as the negative emotions you feel when you just can't fulfill your family activities or personal responsibilities because work keeps interrupting. Here's the catch. When both partners are working from home, neither person can provide what researchers call buffering support. Instead, you're both simultaneously drained by digital interruptions. It creates this vicious cycle of compound stress where you're both mentally exhausted by your own screens, leaving absolutely nothing left in the tank for each other.
Now, what is truly fascinating here is how this stress is distributed. The findings show a stark gender divide in remote work. Even with today's flexible schedules, women are bearing a significantly disproportionate psychological burden. Why is that? Well, it comes down to the continued expectation of invisible labor. Women are still largely shouldering unnoticed domestic chores, childcare, and the emotional support for the family. So, the data clearly shows that when tech intrusions inevitably derail family time, women experience significantly higher levels of psychological distress because they feel the weight of those unmet demands much more acutely.
But of course, this isn't just happening at home. Let's zoom out for a second and look at the macro shift. Consider this staggering number. Over 70 million Americans. That is roughly 36% of the workforce, and they're now operating in the gig economy as independent contractors. Work today is increasingly defined by short-term contracts and platform-mediated tasks, and this is especially true for Gen Z. This massive demographic is actively prioritizing individual mobility and flexibility over the geographic and career stability that traditional family formation used to demand.
To really grasp what a big deal this is, we have to contrast the safety nets. Historically, a huge economic incentive for getting married was the pooling of risk. The traditional marital net offered things like employer-sponsored family health plans, spousal income support, and shared pensions. But today, the digital economy is rapidly building a completely different portable net. We now have individualized health insurance marketplaces, portable benefits, and personal saving apps that follow the individual worker, not the household. So the crucial takeaway here is that the digital economy has virtually decoupled economic survival from the household unit. For most of modern history, marriage was, on some basic level, a functional, material necessity. That era is effectively ending. These portable safety nets of the gig economy have drastically reduced the economic penalty for remaining single in the modern world. Actually, in many cases, traditional marriage is now heavily penalized. Economists call this the benefits cliff. It's the sudden loss of government transfers or subsidies that happens the moment you combine two individual household incomes. So for a lot of people operating in the modern economy, legally marrying isn't an insurance mechanism anymore. It's a proactive financial deterrent that can legitimately threaten their individual financial autonomy.
This brings us to a massive cultural pivot. Driven heavily by the digital economy, we are seeing a dramatic rise in female financial independence. Research highlights that this newly gained economic capability has redefined marriage entirely. It shifted from being a survival necessity to a purely emotional choice. Women, now armed with greater economic opportunities and financial autonomy, are increasingly able to prioritize their personal fulfillment over material security.
And here is where the data gets incredibly specific and, honestly, super fascinating. According to a really comprehensive study from MDPI, there is a specific financial threshold where this autonomy really kicks into high gear. As per capita income grows and hits right around $37,000, divorce rates actually rise. At that point, individuals finally gain the baseline financial autonomy they need to comfortably leave an unsatisfactory union.
It's almost like a giant puzzle when you map it out. There's this unexpected concave relationship between divorce rates and income levels. At low income levels, divorce rates are low because partners literally depend on each other to survive. As income rises toward that $37,000 threshold, the divorce rate peaks. People finally have the means to buy their independence. But get this, at the highest income brackets, the divorce rate actually starts to decline again. Why? Because in highly developed, individualistic societies where loneliness is a growing epidemic, the utility of marriage shifts. Extreme wealth stabilizes relationships not out of financial need, but because of a deep, profound reliance on an intimate partner for emotional support and social interaction.
So, knowing all of this, how do we actually go about adapting to the digital reality?
The economic incentives have clearly completely shifted, and the physical boundaries of our homes have been permanently breached by our devices. To survive this new environment, we really have to look at basic human nature. There's some vital Harvard research that points out a simple truth. Human beings function, collaborate, and relate best with intermittent interaction, not constant interaction. We used to go into an office, have a meeting, retreat to our desk alone, and then commute home. Those always-on technologies have totally destroyed that natural rhythm. So if we want to save our relationships, we have to artificially recreate that intermittent space.
The researchers at UNSW actually laid out a fantastic, actionable playbook to rebuild these boundaries and mitigate that terrible after-work frustration. Step 1 is joint daily planning. Literally sit down and explicitly map out work and family tasks so you aren't colliding in the hallway between Zoom calls. Step 2, aggressively restrict non-urgent meetings after 6 p.m. You have to rebuild that invisible wall between the office and the living room. And step 3 is to physically block out dedicated personal time on your shared calendars. You literally have to schedule your unavailability to the digital world so that you can be completely available to your partner.
Which leaves us with one final thought to chew on. The forces of the digital economy, the remote work, the portable benefits, the gig lifestyle, they aren't going anywhere. This is our new baseline. So, the big question is, how will you redesign your own relationship architecture in the digital age? The fact that you are no longer bound together by pure economic survival is a genuinely beautiful thing. But it also means you must actively and intentionally manage the hidden forces shaping your intimacy. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.